My name is Lauren Harris, and this video will be about the media's different approaches to reporting on the family separation policies on the border when illegal immigrants are detained. The issue is a complicated one, but in its most basic form, the media caught wind that children were being taken from their parents when families were found attempting to illegally cross into the United States. Images of subpar living conditions in detention centers, mixed with President Donald Trump's outspoken nature on his zero-policy immigration practices, only fueled the media frenzy on the subject, and it completely took over news stations. In turn, the general public became extremely involved, and it's one issue that definitely hopped the political divide. Both liberals and conservatives alike demanded an end to the family separation practice. The first news site I'll be examining is Fox. The first article I looked at of theirs was titled, "Trump Signs Executive Order to Stop Family Separations at Border." This article discussed how the president ended child separation while also vowing to enforce border security. The article had much talk of current policies, political process, and monetary figures to fund border technology. There was also some blame cast toward Democrats for failure to pass any immigration reform that those on the conservative side of the political divide had previously proposed. The second article I looked at was titled, "What Trump's Zero-Tolerance Immigration Policy Means for Children Separated from Families at Border." Immediately I noticed in this article that there was an emphasis on the term illegal when describing immigration. It also included quotes from what current policies actually say and compared Trump to other previous presidents who also cracked down on illegal immigration, as if to make him seem not as extreme as some paint him to be. Finally, something that stood out to me was the images that they included of the detention center. While I'd been used to seeing images of children in cages wrapped in aluminum blankets, the picture in this article was of a group of children playing soccer out in a grassy field, complete with goals with netting. Significant with my first point, which is media aesthetics theory. The article I read about was by the Chicago School of Media Theory. In it, it said that, quote, "In its modern form, aesthetics are primarily concerned with creation, interpretation, and ultimate appreciation," end quote. It also, quote, "involves the experience of material through the sensitivity of the beholder," end quote. Essentially, a picture is worth 1,000 words, especially when the picture isn't what you'd expect. This leads into the psychological theory of salience. When something is salient, it stands out, it's unique or shocking, and it sticks in your mind. For example, you are in a room with 100 people with brown hair, but one person has bright blue hair. Who do you think you're going to remember? CNN took a different approach when painting a picture in the minds of viewers. In one article, it is written that every single separated kid had been terrified. The entire article very much plays toward emotion instead of policy, as Fox did. The article says children became disillusioned and that many detention facilities didn't background check the employees in charge of supervising the children. This paints a very different picture than the kids playing soccer that Fox showed. In another article, CNN labeled many of Trump's claims on his actions as false. They say an interview he did on 60 Minutes is explosive. It also says the previous presidents Obama and Bush did not follow a similar policy on family separation at the border, as more conservative news sources have claimed. They say, quote, "There were some instances of parents being separated from their children, but no administration has institutionalized the practice of family separation on such a scale, as intentionally and as broadly as the Trump administration attempted," end quote. The bias here between the two news sites is fairly plain to see. Capital Research Center wrote an article on the theory of media bias. They described bias by commission in which, quote, "a pattern of unfounded assumptions and uncorrected errors that tend to support liberal view," end quote. Often these facts don't stand up to scrutiny. They also mention bias by omission, quote, "ignoring certain facts that disprove liberals or support conservatives," end quote. When CNN says one thing and Fox says the opposite, one must be lying, engaging in bias. The article also makes another good point saying, quote, "while reputable books and studies have no credibility without footnotes, the media often ask you to simply believe them." The real news source I found is a local independent news site run by a man named Davis Vanguard, who did a story on the living conditions of ICE detainees at the Yuba County Jail. He cites a letter written by one detainee who says he was beaten by one of the jail guards. The writer says the jail treats them, quote, worse than abandoned animals, end quote. He writes about brutal conditions, mold, and roaches in food and their beds. There is no water in their cells. He says he's experienced racism, hate, and excessive brutality. He places blame on ICE and Yuba County for the poor conditions that the 200 detainees there must live. With so many different news sites writing so many pieces on one subject, it was no surprise when the public went into uproar over family separation. University of Oregon wrote an article on how media affects those in politics. In it, they quote Regina Lawrence, director of the Journalism Center at the university. Quote, research has shown that some candidates can be literally left invisible because they can't win enough interest from media, end quote. They go on to quote Nicole Dahman, a visual communications researcher, who says, quote, what we see on Facebook is dictated by algorithms that decide what you see based on what you like and dislike, rather than getting a diversity of perspectives that contribute to political discourse. We see an echo chamber, end quote. From these two quotes, we can see how significantly the media and the stories they choose to put out can influence the political world. MassCommunicationsTheory.com wrote an article on agenda setting by the media, a theory that was introduced in 1972. Quote, editors, newsroom staff, and broadcasters play an important part in shaping political reality. That is, media may set the agenda of the campaign, end quote. I don't think there's any question the media sets the precedent. With dozens of articles and hours of television time going into discussion over the issue of family separation, a difference was bound to be made. Looking at all the circumstances as a whole, it is no wonder that the media made such an impact as to make President Trump use executive order to end family separation. This issue is an ideal example of media changing the political agenda and impacting much more than just ratings inside the newsroom.